Hello, it's Andrew Eborn here again with another edition of the Andrew Eborn Show, where my special guest, my very, very special guest, is Richard Jones. How are you doing, Richard?
Not bad at all. How are you, Andrew?
I am incredibly well. And last time we were looking at another example of why it's so important to question everything. And we looked in particular at Jack the Ripper, the myth almost of Jack the Ripper. We found out that it was invented, the name was invented by a journalist. There was no actual link for all of the five crimes. It could well have been more, it could have been less, but people were looking for a pattern. We also looked at the incentive of the people involved, with the politicians and the police were fighting with the press, and therefore they're trying to blame each other, and the lessons that could be learned from history. And I think if it's fair to say, the conclusion we came to is, firstly, Jack the Ripper was never caught. The pattern that we spot is that people, whenever there's a vacuum in the evidence, they fill that, they pollute that, and populate it with conspiracy theories.
Very much so. And that's why it's always so dangerous to leave a vacuum. You need facts. You need facts to be in there. And you also need to fact check as well. I mean, a number of times today when you get conspiracy theories today, and the number of times you'll find people will come up and say, well, you know, I know this because I do a lot of research. And then you think, no, you don't. You just watched a few videos on YouTube. Research means you go back to sources. So you find who wrote the initial article, where did that article come from? If it's a website, you look into the background of that website. Is there an agenda in that website? With newspapers, has a newspaper got a political agenda? Do they have it in the background? That was important in Victorian times. It's important today. In fact, perhaps more so today because of all the social media and the access we've got, because gossip can lead to trouble.
Oh, absolutely. And it's always, as we say beforehand, it's evidence-based, fact-checked journalism, because so often people get their news from one source, and that source is one person's version of events. And we know, in an area now populated with lots of different opinions, you can find evidence to support any argument. So if you always get your news from one source, you're going to get that news confirming your own prejudices. And that then becomes a self-perpetuating myth, doesn't it?
It does so much so, and it's even worse today, of course, because of algorithms. I mean, the thing that amazes me at the moment is that people are you're getting all this stuff about wearing masks, how it's an infringement of our liberty, that, or you know, we're being muzzled. You know, they're taking our liberty away. And people are doing this on social media channels that they've actually given their liberty away to by ticking the box and not even reading what they've agreed to. So all those media channels now are looking at your interests, looking at the sort of people you exchange with, the sort of comments you make. And when you go to look for something on a particular subject, they're going to feed up what they know about you. So you're going to get, if you like, self-perpetuating conspiracy theories that agree with your theory. And that's the danger we have at the moment.
Absolutely. And the biggest currency, and as you know, as a regular contributor to this show, is that the biggest currency we have in the world at the moment is data. And the more information we give about ourselves, the more that we can influence people utilizing that data. And that's the danger. Because what happens, it's very easy to persuade people when you know their sweet spots.
Exactly. In the past, you'd go into the pub and you'd spout something off in the pub, and everyone would go, "Don't be stupid, you know, you're an idiot." But of course, what you're getting on with social media is you're getting channels that, or you're getting group information that basically from people who agree with you, and then they're sharing things with you that you then reshare. And so the social media learns, well, this is what you're interested in. So even when you go on and you'll search on Google and you'll search for information, Google knows what you've been interested in. So they'll search up the results to do with what you're interested in, and you won't get a balanced view of it. And that works both ways. I'm not just talking about sort of the way out conspiracy theories. It works for everything. You've got to look at sort of you've got to look at the source and say, what's the agenda of this source? And if you can't find an agenda, then you think, well, that's not the original source then. So you've got to go back and back and back. And the funny thing about so many of these things, there seems to be a template that I started noticing round about Brexit time, when they were putting out all the stuff about, there's lots of posts doing the rounds of this is what staying in the EU means. And then there's always that comment, and all this can be verified. And then they go on and list 10 things. Now, now most people won't take the trouble to verify those 10 points. If you verify them, none of them can be verified. And the same thing's happening now with face masks, that you're going to get hypoxia, that you're going to get carbon dioxide poisoning because you're breathing in your own fumes. And all these emails now are starting, and all this can be verified. And when you go through all the facts, none of them can be verified. It's this laziness that we don't look at things. That's where research is so important. And research isn't just watching videos on YouTube.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. And what we always say is, look, get your news from many different sources. I urge the children, and indeed everybody else, not just family members, is not only, we'll start with the BBC, but you look at ITV, we look at Fox, we look at Russia Today, we look at Al Jazeera. See how they report one news event, and then work out that the truth is somewhere between those. It was Goebbels, wasn't he, who said, tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. And I think people are so desperate to have their own prejudices confirmed that they will listen out for those prejudices and only goes to those sources. And that's where the danger lies.
And it's a huge danger, and it's a danger we don't see. It's a danger we don't see because it's the invisible danger. It's to a lot of people don't understand the value of data to these big companies. A face mask, being made to wear a face mask, being mandatory, that's a physical manifestation. So you can see that, oh, it's a loss of my liberty, you know. So people can get all up in arms in there. And yet, like I said earlier, but they don't see the problem of giving all their data, everything about their lives, to these big corporations who are storing it. And that's being stored and then worked on by algorithms. And it's going to be there for years and years to come. And gradually, those computers are getting a massive picture of you and your likes. And that way, and this is where the danger is, that's how you start to manipulate a population. And so we think we could never go back to what happened in, I mean, I'm not being extreme here, but we think we could never go back to what happened in Germany in the 1930s with the rise of the Nazi Party. But it's all about propaganda. And if you actually know people's sweet spots, like you say, then you do it, say it often enough, and people will start to believe it, and they'll start to find scapegoats to blame. And then before you know it, you've walked down a road you don't want to go down.
Well, absolutely. And actually, I mean, history is populated with that. And you turn around and say it's all about the hearts and minds, and it's all about influence. And the more that we can urge people to question everything, go back to evidence-based journalism, go back to the sources, what Jimmy Wales tried to do with Wiki Tribune, and have a look at that sort of side where you get lots of journalists, but you need to have so many on that sort of basis to make sure you keep going back and back and back. But what people can do for their own basis is just say, look, does that sound right? And I know we've given examples in history. We looked at Jack the Ripper last time and say, well, hang about, if you shine the spotlight on it, did that really happen? Or is this another fairy tale when you're looking at the reasons people might be telling things in a certain way? And what we do know, there's certain common elements. Fear always sells. It's the Barnard, the father of PR. He will tell you fear will sell. And you look at people panicking, for example, when the pandemic first struck, you think we're going to be locked down forever. So people panic bought toilet paper and dry pasta and that sort of stuff. That always happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're fine. I mean, I've got toilet paper for the next 50 years. I mean, it's fantastic. But no, it does. You're right.
And you look at that sort of side. So we would absolutely urge people to question everything. And that's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to shine a spotlight on a lot of those stories that people may have taken for granted, those which have been Disneyfied, if you like, into here's a wonderful fantasy tale and we celebrate Jack the Ripper. Maybe there wasn't a Jack the Ripper. If nobody was found as a Jack the Ripper, but we're looking for a pattern and we're looking for why people might have romanticized even, because that's what happens with history. You romanticize what are really gruesome crimes. If you look at the reasons for that, that's where we might approach things in a slightly different way.
Very much so. And if you look at popular, the Victorians did this. We're doing it as well. When society feels threatened, which we do at the moment, and we have done for a long time, the Victorians felt threatened by technology and by the revolutions going on all over Europe. And when a society feels threatened, they take refuge in the past. They look back to a glorious past when everything was fantastic. The Victorians went back to the medieval ages and the Middle Ages, medieval times, and of course that's when chivalry became Gothic revival. Everything was the Middle Ages. We're doing it now. We're going back to that golden age pre-Brexit that I can remember. I can remember growing up in the 70s, sitting in the dark because of 3-day weeks and power cuts, and it was an adventure, lighting the candles. But we always look back through rose-tinted spectacles. And if there's one thing history tells us, is that's the most dangerous thing you can do, because you can't go back. You should only go forward.
Nostalgia ain't what it used to be, as they always say.
It isn't. And of course, there's the other thing that we're getting at the moment, which I forget who coined the phrase, but it's I think it was maybe a Russian phrase, but it's the fire hose of falsehoods. That if you keep blasting people with information, suddenly people start getting information overload, and so they don't want to, or they don't want to, haven't got the time to, or don't have the inclination to actually look behind the story. They'll just look at the headline. And so if you actually keep spraying that fire hose of falsehoods at people, then some of it's going to sort of stay on the wall for a while. And it's
fire hose of falsehood, absolutely. And that's what they say. It's Goebbels, exactly the same sort of sentiment. Tell a lie often enough and it becomes the truth. And especially if you've got people hungry for confirmation of their own prejudices.
And that's where we get the danger, because if your prejudices are there and you keep finding verification, and if you notice, there's always, for example, with the anti-vax conspiracies, it's always a doctor somewhere, and that they must know what they're talking about. They're a doctor, and then you start looking into that doctor's background, and you find that something's happened. I won't name any names because for reasons you'll know as a barrister, but eventually you'll look into that background and they've been struck off, or they've been discredited, and they've done this and done that, but because they've got.
Absolutely. But you work on that sort of basis. And again, I love looking at the power of persuasion. If we can learn lessons, the power of somebody standing there with a clipboard or a white coat on or a high vis jacket, and how you can get access to places as a result of expectations, it is peppered. History is peppered with how persuasive that can be. So as soon as you get that power, and you also couple that with data as to how you can influence people, that's the time to worry.
And that's what's happening to us now. We've got all these things, all these little robots or whatever they are, looking into, watching what we do, watching every keystroke we take, every friend we exchange views with, the friends we exchange views with the most. The computers then link all that together and think, yeah, this will go. And then, of course, that data is valuable to somebody who's trying to spread misinformation, because we tend to think, yeah, it's just somebody sitting like us.
As you know, that's what on several times we've accurately predicted the results of several elections around the world, often against the pollsters. And the reason that works is it was brilliantly personified, if you like, in a drama which they did about Brexit. And they showed you, Benedict Cumberbatch, he played the character, he played Cummings, interestingly, in the middle, about how that was manipulated. It doesn't matter about the people who are definitely going to vote for you, or those who are definitely not going to vote for you. What you're looking at is, how do you influence those in the middle who are undecided? And they started getting the data and the power of that data, and you play to the sound bites which will appeal to those people. And that's how you win.
Well, wasn't that the thing with Steve Bannon? Is it Steve Bannon and Donald Trump? He said we need to find the unknown Trump supporters, or the ones who don't know they're Trump supporters. Those are the people we need to find, and that's how they did it. And the problem is that I don't think the authorities, the mainstream political parties, are social savvy. They or social media savvy. They're used to politics as it was, and we've moved into a brave new world where politics isn't as it was. And people are now, and people had genuine grievances against Europe. People have genuine grievances against what the government's doing now. But the point is that if somebody can then get into your subconscious and just drip feed that little doubt in your mind, and the point is, why would they want to do it? Well, if you divide society, it's the thing I hate to say, it's the thing the British were brilliant at: divide and conquer.
No, absolutely. And it's looking at those. It's the power of persuasion. Because if you can grab somebody's attention long enough, that you can persuade them either to buy something as they do in advertising or to vote in a particular way. That's where the spin doctors, the sultans of spin, to coin Dire Straits, you turn round on that sort of basis. Those are the people who influence our future. And not just the people, but also, as you know, I'm actively working with AI, artificial intelligence, which will come up with all the sort of mechanisms, the way that you can persuade people. And this is why it's so dangerous. And we have to be so careful as to what information we give people and to which people we give that information.
Yeah. And the worst bit of it, of course, is that half the time they don't really believe in what they're doing. They're just doing it because it's their job to do it. They've been employed by a political party or by a particular entity to promote their thing. Next week they might be promoting the opposite side, or next month they might be promoting the opposite side or an opposite candidate. So in the past, at least, you had politicians that believed in their cause. Now it's just the cynical, yeah, well, we'll just manipulate people. And like you say, and I think you've always said this, haven't you? Question everything.
I have to question everything. It's rather like a lawyer, as I say, your background as a lawyer, but background as a barrister, is you're a paid mouthpiece. And what you're doing is you're communicating the best possible case for your client, which is why we get consulted by several people wanting to persuade people to buy particular products in the advertising world, to buy people in terms of products or services, but also to buy political parties and votes. And it's understanding the power of influence, understanding the power of data, and understanding that if you don't question everything, that's where the danger lies.
And of course, as a barrister, there's now this thing that that's being looked into about legal disputes being settled online. That it's a computerized process to do it now, which is being looked into. And if you think about that, how easy would jury tampering be if somebody could get at that information and the jury and find out all about the juries? And of course, do we know that it's not happening? That jury tampering isn't going on through jurors' social medias, that they found out, well, hang on, we've got to find out who's interested in this. And then you drip feed stuff through to them via social media, and you select juries on that process. So it's hugely dangerous. It's massively dangerous. And we just give it away because we tick that box. And all the big internet companies know if they give us something for free, most people won't look into, why am I getting this for free?
Well, and they always say that if you're getting something for free, then you're the product. And
Yeah,
what they mean by
exactly.
that is you're giving your data. So the lesson today is question everything and be very, very careful about your data. Richard, an absolute pleasure as always. We'll be exploring more topics throughout history, shining our wonderful spotlight on those. But for now, Richard Jones, thank you very much for joining me.
Andrew Eborn, thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye. So thank you indeed to Richard Jones for joining me on another edition of Andrew Eborn's Question Everything. The power of data, the power of making sure we get evidence-based journalism has never been more apparent. By shining a spotlight on some of those stories in history and working out that actually the truth may be a bit different to what we have been told for many, many years. If you have any areas that you'd like us to investigate, or you'd like to be a guest yourself on the Andrew Eborn Show, write to me at guests@octopustv.com, and I'll be delighted to have a look and welcome you here. Also, don't forget to subscribe on all the usual channels. Follow me at Andrew Eborn at Octopus TV. But for now, I've been Andrew Eborn. You've been great. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. See you next time. Bye-bye.